Daniel Ashton. What if a calm morning trip abruptly descended into a terrifying nightmare? How does a well-liked member of the community end up the victim of an unprovoked violent act? And what happens when justice eludes us for over half a century? Daniel Ashton Walker was well-liked and well-respected in his community for his kind disposition and always readiness to provide a helping hand to those in need. But the peacefulness of his life was suddenly upended on that tragic October 1, 1974 morning. His life of peace was being overcast by a gloomy cloud. Daniel's day began as any other, with little indication of the disaster that would befall him. Daniel went about his everyday activities, not realizing that his life was about to take a drastic shift as the sun rose higher and higher in the sky, illuminating the heavens in shades of orange and pink. Daniel's Volkswagen van was parked in San Bernardino County, California, alongside Interstate 40, some 60 miles west of Needles. Ken Robinson, an 18-year-old hitchhiker, accompanied him on the ride. They had made the decision to pause their travels and recuperate for a bit. He packed up his van and departed from his family in Santa Ana the previous day, heading back home. The vastness of the California desert opened up in front of them, providing a brief break from the routine of their everyday existence. Daniel and Ken settled down to get ready for a little break in their journey as the clock reached 6 in the morning. They lay back in the van, enjoying the quiet before the storm, as the serene tranquility of the early morning hours engulfed them. The abrupt crackling of gunfire startled Daniel, shattering the peace of their little rest. Before we continue, we want to remind you that only a small percentage of people who watch our videos are actually subscribed. So if you enjoy our content, consider subscribing. It's free and you can always change your mind later. Now, let's move on with the video. A shooter, who was yet unidentified, had come out of the shadows and ripped through the still morning air with a hail of bullets. Daniel was struck several times while unprepared and at a loss for protection. Fearful and driven by survival instinct, Ken avoided the onslaught as the mayhem spread. They ran from the scene, running into the darkness of the early morning as they prayed for rescue. They eventually managed to stop a passing driver who immediately called the police. As soon as emergency responders arrived, they got to work moving Daniel to a local hospital. Daniel's life was sadly cut short as a result of his injuries, despite the medical team's best efforts to stabilize him. Daniel Ashton Walker, a cherished young man approaching his 22nd birthday, departed from this life. With unyielding devotion, law enforcement searched the site painstakingly for any evidence that would provide light on the identity of the elusive attacker. Detectives first believed that the shooting was motivated by robbery as they investigated Daniel's terrible death. But confusing facts surfaced that called into question this theory. The thieves had surprisingly only taken $80 from Daniel, mysteriously leaving behind travelers' checks totaling a sizable $600. The fact that the attackers had left Daniel's motorcycle, stereo, and luggage in the back of his vehicle undisclosed further complicated the situation. Law enforcement officers in California, Nevada, and Arizona were alerted and stopped each gold van that fit the reported description after receiving a detailed description of the suspect's vehicle. When the suspect's gold van got trapped in the sand earlier that morning, the delivery man told investigators that the suspects waved him down. One of the suspects informed the delivery man that they were traveling to Indiana, and that in case they were stranded, they would use the sagebrush and shotgun to shoot down poles to provide traction for their tires. The delivery man assisted with the van's towing, but declined to be paid for his work. The fact that law enforcement authorities from other states coordinated highlighted how serious the issue was. This demonstrated their dedication to obtaining information and making sure that the person or people responsible for this senseless act would face consequences. Although Ken's narrative included some insightful details, the attack's true motivation remained a mystery. Detectives looked at a variety of ideas as the investigation went on to try to explain the violent, seemingly random act. They looked at the chances that it was a random act of aggression and the potential that it was a targeted attack with personal motivations. The fact that the incident was committed in a rural area along a lonely route made the investigation much more difficult. It became more challenging to determine if the attackers planned the attack or took advantage of a chance that knocked. The San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office conducted a comprehensive investigation, but they were unable to resolve the issue. The Sheriff's Department's Cold Case Unit persistently pursued new leads in the case over the course of 5 decades, revisiting it on occasion. Nevertheless, time proved to be a powerful foe, and the team was unable to gather any useful information to ultimately solve Daniel Ashton Walker's case. On November 15, 2023, a noteworthy advancement occurred when the Cold Case team decided to pick up where they left off. In January 2024, they were able to identify the main suspect in the case as the notorious serial killer, 73-year-old Thomas Eugene Creech, thanks to their intensified efforts. Critical information, including verified personal data from Creech's own admissions regarding the killing case, served as the foundation for this breakthrough. The district attorney's offices in San Bernardino County, California, and Ada County, Idaho, worked together to guarantee the accuracy of their conclusions. As a result of Creech's increased cooperation, the San Bernardino County District Attorney's Office was consulted regarding the next steps in Daniel Walker's legal pursuit. Shortly after Daniel's clemency hearing, Thomas Eugene Creech, a convicted offender with a history of repeated confessions, was brought into the case. He is the longest-serving prisoner in Idaho and is scheduled to be put to death for multiple killings. Although he has only been found guilty of 5 crimes, other people think he may be accountable for over 40 separate killings. They think this because he confessed to killing 42 individuals in more than a dozen places in America during his trial in 1975. Authorities have confirmed Creech's claims on Daniel's case, although his public attorney expressed issues regarding the timing of these disclosures. They implied that previous attempts to connect Creech to other killings had been unfounded. Prosecutors in Ada County characterized Creech as a manipulative and unrepentant sociopath, raising the possibility that his latest remarks were a premeditated attempt to evade execution. The seriousness of the matter and Creech's nuanced personality lent even more intrigue to Daniel's quest for justice. San Bernardino County is getting closer to conclusion as Thomas Eugene Creech is named as the main suspect in Daniel Walker's case. Justice in this sad case of needless murder may finally be served after over 50 years, providing some comfort to Daniel's loved ones and the community at large. Doug Walker, Daniel's brother, wrote and self-published Daniel, My Brother, Mystery in the Mojave on Amazon. Doug claimed to have given his brother's character 2 whole chapters in the novel. Daniel's father stated in their final letter to him, "Everyone talks so highly of you. Always and without exception." Whether they intend to extradite and prosecute Creech has not yet been made public by the San Bernardino County District Attorney's Office. We have received the complaints and are keeping in touch with the Ada County District Attorney's Office and our San Bernardino County investigative team in order to pursue justice in this case, according to spokeswoman Jacqueline Rodriguez. According to Doug Walker, killing Creech is not always the right kind of justice. He stated, "I don't mind at all if they can show that whoever did it, did it. It is not my decision to determine if they die or not. That's above my salary level." Moving on to the next case. Dylan Round. When Dylan was only 4 years old, his parents, Justin and Candace Round, got divorced. As a result, he divided his time between Idaho Falls, where his father lived, and Twin Falls, where their mother lived, along with his younger brother and sister. Even though they were far apart, Dylan felt a strong connection to the outdoors, a fundamental part of Idahoan culture at both places. He was deeply in love with the wilderness at an early age, finding pleasure and comfort there. Dylan had a distinct love for the outdoors, whether he was climbing through dense forests, fishing in crystal-clear mountain streams, or just exploring tough terrain. On May 28, 2022, the young man, who was well known for his love of the outdoors and his spirit of adventure, was reported missing. That morning, he called his grandmother and told her he was taking the grain truck into shelter. After that, he did not hear from his grandma again. Dylan abruptly disappeared from his own farm property in Lewiston, where he was residing in an RV trailer close to the Nevada-Utah line. This led to a murder inquiry that uncovered a startling chain of events. Unsettling evidence was swiftly found during the investigation. A pair of Dylan's boots was found by deputies close to his property during the first search for him. DNA testing identified a bloodstain on one of the boots as belonging to Dylan, and the boots also contained the DNA of a guy named James Brenner. This implied the possibility of manipulation following Dylan's vanishing. Around the time of Dylan's disappearance, Brenner was known to be a squatter living on Dylan's land. Brenner was one of Dylan's last contacts before he vanished, according to his parents. Dylan's phone records were later examined, and they showed that he had been at a secluded Lewiston property on the day before he disappeared. Dylan's phone's last signal was located at the Lewiston Pond. After doing a complete search, Dylan's phone was found. A time-lapse movie that was shot around the time of Dylan's disappearance was discovered through digital forensic examination of his phone. Brenner was seen in the video cleaning a gun, with obvious bloodstains on his shirt and arms. Authorities examined the clothing and determined that Dylan's DNA was present. The evidence was mounting, and it was clear that Brenner was involved in Dylan Round's abduction and likely death. Dylan's family and the community awaited justice as the detectives carried out their job, hoping for answers that would put an end to this awful case. Based on strong evidence acquired throughout the inquiry, Brenner was charged with significant offenses in March 2023, including first-degree felony and abuse or degradation of a human body, which is also a third-degree crime. The time-lapse video, the shirt Brenner wore in the video that showed traces of Dylan's DNA, and the DNA found on Dylan's boots that were found during the initial search efforts were the main pieces of evidence that the prosecution used to build their case. The investigation brought Brenner's worrisome criminal past to light in addition to the evidence findings. His violent past was well documented, and he had already served a prison sentence for felon in possession of a firearm. Dylan's family and the community held out hope for justice and closure in the heartbreaking case as the legal process moved forward. Because of the overwhelming evidence and Brenner's past, a bleak picture was drawn, making both the public and the authorities eager for this tragic saga to come to an end. Authorities continued to aggressively search for Dylan's body as part of the ongoing investigation into his abduction and probable death. Extensive searches have been conducted in the regions where Dylan was last observed, with a particular emphasis on sites connected to the evidence amassed in Brenner's case. Dylan was not found by the detectives, and their search was abandoned. Brenner and the Box Elder County Attorney's Office reached a plea agreement in 2024. He had to reveal Dylan's last resting place in order to have his charges dropped. At last, some 2 years later, on April 9, 2024, Dylan's skeleton remains were found in the isolated Lewiston area of western Box Elder County. He was shot in the head and died as a result. Dylan's family has set up a Facebook page and a special website. The initial goals of these platforms were to disseminate information about the continuing search operations, make updates on the investigation's progress, and give the community a way to offer tips or information that could help in the Dylan search. After he was located, they made use of the platforms to support more national searches for missing persons. The consequences of violence and the community's unwavering quest for the truth are brought home by Dylan's story. More than 24 of Dylan's family members were there for the sentencing on July 1, 2024. Brenner heard Dylan's father say, "This is how you repay Dylan for all the times he helped you. All I can hope is that you consider this for the rest of your life." Brenner was hired by Dylan to labor on his farm, and on occasion, the two of them even shared meals. Brenner has not spoken to the court or provided any more details regarding the events that led him to kill Dylan. He refused to stand in front of Dylan's family as well as other friends and supporters who had come in the courtroom. James Brenner received a sentence that included a maximum 30-year jail term. Because of his lack of empathy, the judge will encourage the parole board to keep him behind bars for as long as feasible. Although the legal aspect of it and the worry of constantly waiting, what will happen, when will it happen, and what if it doesn't, are aspects of it that we can now put to rest, according to Dylan's mother. While we had hoped for a better outcome, we knew from the beginning that Dylan was no longer living, according to another family member. With this latest revelation, the investigation has completed its full circle, allowing us to finally return Dylan home and bring this chapter to an end. Moving on to the next case. Mary Jane Croft. Mary Jane Croft was born in Montana on November 19, 1911, the fourth of John and Anna Croft's 8 children. On January 29, 1929, at the age of 17, she wed James Wesley Van Gilder. After their twins were stillborn in 1935, Mary Jane gave birth to their 5th child by the time World War II broke out. But something happened in Mary Jane and James's marriage 2 years after the birth of their youngest child, Cheryl Judy Gay Van Gilder. After that, Mary Jane left the Van Gilder family farm. She rented an apartment in downtown Fairmont, above the former Fairmont Theater, after divorcing James and her kids. In Fairmont, West Virginia, she subsequently began working. Mary Jane Van Gilder left her husband James and their 5 children behind when she traveled from Fairmont to Huron County, Ohio, in 1944. At the Wilkins Air Force Depot in Shelby, Ohio, 7 miles from Plymouth, she accepted a civilian position. Mary Jane would buy war bonds from various Shelby area People's Bank branches throughout this time of her family's estrangement. After that, she would mail them to Anna Mae, her eldest child. Anna Mae told me that after sending me war bonds, she wrote to ask that I return them by mail. She then proceeded to cash the bonds at several Ohio banks. Anna Mae added that occasionally her mother would also send clothes for her. She started to become curious and demand answers regarding her parents' divorce despite these enigmatic messages from her mother. Mary Jane asked for all of the bonds to be returned to her in January 1945. That marked the end of her relationship with her family. According to court documents, on February 12, 1945, she filed for divorce in Ohio. Less than a month later, on March 8, 1945, she announced her resignation from her position, citing an increase in domestic responsibilities as her reason. When Mary Jane did not appear in court, her counsel withdrew her divorce case in April 1946. However, James Van Gilder had already received his divorce decree from a West Virginia court by that point. James remarried in 1946 and carried on raising the children he and Mary Jane had together. In 1985, James departed from this life. Although Mary Jane's loved ones made multiple attempts to locate her over the years, she was never formally reported missing at the time of her disappearance. Not until Lester Croft, Mary Jane's brother, came home from World War II did Anna Mae start looking for her mother in earnest. Lester visited the Marion County Sheriff and corresponded with the Plymouth, Ohio police chief. They corresponded during the 1960s and into the following decades, but they didn't discover their mother's previous life until 2004. One of her grandkids received a letter from William King the next month when an article about her appeared in a Plymouth newspaper in December 2004. He claimed to have worked with Mary Jane at the Ohio Depot but had lost contact with her during layoffs at the company. Up until 2018, the family search would linger at 2004 results. Mary Jane's granddaughter, Mindy Wilson, sent a Facebook comment to the Shelby Police Department in October 2018. Detective Adam Turner was given the case by Police Chief Lance Combs. He combed through Ohio's and the nation's unidentified descendant cases for years, looking for any that fit Mary Jane's description. He discovered a newspaper item about a Jane Doe that was discovered in Preble County, Ohio in the 1960s while conducting his investigation. The description of the deceased woman's remains seemed to fit Mary Jane. Late in 2019, the bones were dug up and transported to a state crime lab. Turner stated, "They informed me that the body was not Mary Jane Van Gilder based on some DNA testing they were able to perform. This is how the tale may have ended. "I might have simply said, 'I'm done,'" Turner remarked. "This no longer belongs to me. Preble County is this." Nevertheless, he made the decision to move forward, working with Moxie Forensic Investigations to create a DNA profile and using investigative genetic genealogy to solve the case. After 3 years and a few delays brought on by the pandemic, they discovered Preble County. In the end, Jane Doe was not a woman. The closest related to the human remains, Tina Barrett of Cincinnati, a great-niece, has the same DNA. Tina had entered her DNA profile into the public genealogy database GEDmatch, where users may choose to grant law enforcement access to their personal data. Albert Frost, a Hamilton, Ohio resident who vanished sometime in the early 1960s, is the owner of the human remains. So when Albert's body was discovered in May 1968, why did the coroner think he was a woman? His bones, which were dispersed across roughly 75 feet, were severely decayed. Turner believes that the fact that Albert was short and extremely thin could have contributed to the error. The cause of death could not be ascertained by the coroner. Turner revealed that there was a rumor among his nieces and nephews, who are among his surviving family members, that Albert was fatally battered outside of an Eaton, Ohio pub. Turner solved another enigma when he contacted Tina. Tina expressed the following: "Because I had never heard of Albert before, I initially assumed they were discussing my great-aunt Clara. Nobody discussed it. It turns out that the same family has 2 lost siblings. Clara, Albert's sister, vanished also and was never found again. She went by the pseudonym Inez and disappeared 10 years before Albert did in the 1950s. She was in her early 20s. When the young mother vanished, she was residing in Cleveland, Ohio. Turner was informed by several family members that Clara's mother had sold her to a man who would go on to marry her. When she disappeared, their 2 children together were only a newborn and a toddler. Clara's family reported to the police that she had suffered physical abuse from her husband because they found her disappearance odd. Clara's husband reported to the police at the time that she had just fled. According to Tina, she wasn't the kind of person to simply get up and walk away. By 1952, Turner learned that her husband had remarried and relocated the family to Pennsylvania. Clara's late husband is being investigated in this case. He passed away many years ago, according to information from her family. Mary Jane's disappearance investigation remained an unresolved cold case. When Turner was able to obtain Mary Jane's military personnel file and post it online, it gave him a breakthrough in the cold case. Turner refers to her as a civilian sleuth who had been following the case. November 2023. The woman learned about Percy L. Sebring's name. Upon further investigation, they discovered that this individual, like Mary Jane, had also worked at the Wilkins Air Force Depot in Ohio. A few days after filing for divorce in February 1945, she was promoted to high-lift fork operator, according to employee records. She replaced Percy in the role and most likely learned from him. Turner discussed this breakthrough as follows. There were dozens of names in Mary Jane's military file, but this one in particular would turn out to be important. 1969 saw Percy's passing in Kansas City, Missouri. A train rolled over him. However, Turner was able to track down his documents and discovered he had wed Mary Jane Sebring. She was born on the same day as Mary Jane van Gilder and died in 1990. The couple was residents of Arkansas and had 2 children, one of whom was born in December 1945 and was named Percy Jr. 9 months have passed since Mary Jane quit her position at Wilkins Air Force Depot. Turner contacted Bobby Sebring, one of Percy Jr.'s children, on Facebook and informed him that she was unaware of her grandmother's existence and that it had not been discussed. According to Turner, Bobby and her siblings provided him pictures of their grandmother, demonstrating beyond a shadow of a doubt that Mary Jane Sebring was, in fact, Mary Jane van Gilder. He contrasted their signatures as well. The structure and design of every letter were strikingly similar. It became official in 2024 after a DNA test. Without a doubt, Mary Jane Sebring was Mary Jane van Gilder. Mary Jane Sebring was using a different social security number than the one that was listed in her military personnel file, which she had somehow obtained. Following her death from colon cancer on May 31, 1990, Mary Jane was interred next to her husband, Percy, in his native Louisiana. The Sebrins, Mary Jane's grandchildren, thought she was amazing and the epitome of a grandma. She enjoyed gardening, and hydrangeas were her favorite flower. She was an excellent chef and enjoyed sun tea. Turner claimed that during Mary Jane's terminal illness, she confided in one of her granddaughters about something she was unable to disclose to her and would never know. According to him, her granddaughter had previously thought that her grandma was speaking incoherently, but everything now makes sense. Turner said that after spending decades looking for Mary Jane, the Van Gilder children and grandkids had experienced great anguish in learning the truth about her fate. Though she never had the opportunity to meet her grandmother, Mindy Wilson expressed gratitude for having been able to inform Mary Jane's surviving children about her passing. "Our family has at last found closure," Mindy added, "but it has been a hard road. Our grandmother's disappearance began many years ago, before I was even born." Turner claimed that because their grandma lied to them about her past and never revealed who she truly was, the Sebring grandchildren have also been going through the range of emotions. He continued by saying that the reason Mary Jane chose to leave her family in West Virginia and begin a new life somewhere is still a mystery, and most likely will never be discovered. A family that mourned her for 79 years and loved and looked after her. It demonstrates how actions we make can have an impact on generations of members of our immediate family as well as our descendants, even beyond time and space. We should always think about the people we love when making decisions in life. Mary Jane, it turns out, had a family and a second secret existence. Both families were unaware of one another. The disappearance of Mary Jane van Gilder was a story of reinvention rather than malicious play. She made the decision to start again and move on from her background, which was unknown until Detective Turner's tenacious research ended a family's long-term search. Moving on to the next case. Robert Scott Parish. Parish Wallpaper and Paint Incorporated was owned by Robert Scott Parish, a well-respected businessman in Fort Wayne, Indiana, who was 49 years of age. Scott was well established in his hometown of Fort Wayne, where he served as a volunteer for several local groups in addition to being well known for his business accomplishments. Jim and Nancy Parish, as well as his siblings Mike, Greg, Tom, and Danny, loved and appreciated Scott as a dedicated family man. His devotion to his company and the community won him a lot of admirers in Fort Wayne. Scott's business went beyond being a neighborhood enterprise. It was evidence of his dedication to providing high-quality products and services that he gained the respect and allegiance of numerous clients over the years. Nobody realized that beneath the surface of this seemingly ideal life were the beginnings of a tragedy that would soon come to pass. Around 6:30 p.m. on March 29, 2006, Scott's brother Danny and his wife Patty were called when Scott did not show up for work and did not pick up his phone. They went to check on Scott at his residence in the 1000 block of Vermont Avenue, fearing something was amiss. They discovered something awful inside. Scott had been shot in the head and lay unconscious in the restroom. They quickly dialed the cops in a panic. Danny and Patty described how they discovered Scott sitting on the toilet, fully clothed, with the lid down, and suffering from a gunshot wound when the police arrived. There was dried blood on the cabinet in front of him and blood splashed on the wall beside the toilet, making the scene gory. At the scene, it was pronounced that Scott was dead. He sustained 2 gunshot wounds in contact behind his left ear, one of which left through his forehead and the other through the top of his skull. He also sustained a bullet wound to his upper arm that was completely internal. A brass-colored .40 caliber Smith & Wesson round casing was discovered by crime scene investigators on the bathroom floor, close to the bathtub. Near Scott's left hand, on the floor in front of the toilet, lay another shell casing. There was a third missile found on the bathroom sink. As the investigation went on, the investigators made an unexpected discovery: a covert marijuana grow operation in the basement, hiding behind a fake wall. They discovered a Black & Decker cordless screwdriver nearby, which may have been used recently. This finding prompted a lot of inquiries. Did Scott engage in any illegal activity, or was there someone else use his land without permission? Is his death related to this illicit operation? Now, investigators had to piece together a complicated case in which Scott's reputation as a well-liked businessman and volunteer in the community was suddenly overshadowed by sinister secrets kept within his house. The coroner formally classified the death as a killing case the next day. More than a mile from his house in the Heartland Church parking lot was where his wallet was discovered. The wallet included his library card and driver's license, but no cash. Police spoke with a witness who had been acquainted with Scott for 3 years in January 2008. The witness mentioned Derek Rodney Johnson, also known as Q, a Hispanic man who the police already suspected when they questioned him about the crime. The witness said that Johnson, a native of Texas, frequently brags about his propensity for killing and robbing people. Another crucial witness came forward with crucial information on January 26, 2008. A few weeks after Scott's death, the witness related a conversation she had with Johnson. The witness remembered conversing with Johnson in his South Lafayette Street kitchen, where he demonstrated 2 pot plants growing in a closet. Subsequently, he stated that he had obtained the plants during a theft. According to the witness, Johnson acknowledged shooting Scott in the head as the robber tried to take a gun out of a safe in his restroom. Although Scott had multiple marijuana plants in his basement, according to Johnson, he only took 2 of the plants and a little quantity of marijuana. The witness went on to say that Johnson had once owned 2 .40 caliber weapons, but it was unclear where they were kept. Detectives spoke with Johnson at the Westville Correctional Facility on July 31, 2014. After entering a guilty plea to 2 charges of aggravated violence and 1 count of criminal negligence for shooting Leonardo Puentes in Fort Wayne in 2006, he was already serving a sentence of years in state prison. He received a 34-year sentence, with 2029 serving as the earliest potential date of release. He acknowledged knowing Scott through a mutual acquaintance, Witness 1, with whom he had worked on construction sites, after being advised of his rights and having to sign a waiver. Additionally, he disclosed that he first purchased marijuana from Scott through Witness 1 and then from Scott directly. Afterwards, he admitted to owning 2 Smith & Wesson firearms chambered in .40 caliber at the time of Scott's murder and to being acquainted with the design of Scott's bathroom due to his use of it for the acquisition of illegal substances. Johnson wrote a letter to detectives on July 1, 2015, when he was at the NCCF Annex in Newcastle. He wrote in the letter that Scott had been executed by his gang, Northern Vados Locos, for stealing money and marijuana. He claimed that even though he was aware of the offender's identity, the gang's rule of silence prevented him from telling anyone. Johnson clarified that he had ordered the hit after reporting Scott to his gang bosses. He further mentioned that the shooter had sent him pictures of Scott after the killing. Johnson explained that there wouldn't be any indications of resistance because the gang members had shot Scott after sitting him down on the toilet because they were angry at his lying. Although he acknowledged taking part in a few robberies, he maintained that he never intended for anyone to suffer harm. Johnson said the gun had been given to one of his crew members and then sold to an unidentified person. He denied ever possessing twin .40 caliber Smith & Wesson firearms, but he did characterize the weapons as a matching set, one left-handed and one right-handed. Johnson retracted after being informed by investigators of his earlier admission from July 2014, in which he acknowledged owning 2 Smith & Wesson firearms chambered in .40 caliber and being armed when doing business with Scott. He stated that he had possessed a variety of firearms and that he was unsure if the bullet originated from one of them. The case went unresolved, and there were no arrests for almost 18 years. Detectives Darren Strayer and Brian Martin resumed interrogating witnesses in 2023. Eventually, fresh information and witness accounts surfaced in 2024, which resulted in Derek Johnson being charged. Johnson's interest in the case seemed to stem from the marijuana grow he discovered in Scott's basement. He admitted to the police that he had taken the marijuana plants and shot Scott in the head. This discovery represents a major advancement for the people of Fort Wayne. After almost 18 years, it provides the victim with justice and gives the Parish family closure. Detective Brian Martin attributes a new interview in the case to playing cards that the FWPD put in nearby jails with biographies of unsolved slaying cases. Danny reported that since that night in 2006, he had not slept properly. He and his spouse erected a memorial bench at Fort Wayne's Lakeside Park in honor of Scott. The date of Derek Rodney Johnson's sentencing is still pending. Moving on to the next case. Samantha Tapp. Tapp's friends called Samantha, or Sam, a hilarious girl who loved to make other people laugh. Kendale, her sister, echoed similar opinion. When Sam was a teenager, she enjoyed hanging out in the open air, interacting with others, and attending local speedways to watch auto racing. For Sam, though, it wasn't all fun and games. After experiencing a difficult upbringing, she and her sister were placed in foster care until their foster mother was unable to care for them. After that, Sam was transferred to live with an aunt but was later reunited with her sibling when she moved in with the girl's grandparents in Burleson. Kendale was then sent to live with their grandparents. Kendale regarded the two as having a close friendship since they could always rely on one another and were there for one another. She is especially concerned about Sam's disappearance because of this. Sam, then 16, went to see Kendale on October 12, 2004, after she had moved out with a partner. The sisters quarreled when they were together. According to some reports, they clashed because Sam was angry that her sister had moved out of their grandparents' house, although Kendall claimed it was probably something insignificant. When she wanted to stay with Kendall, she was instructed to go home after Kendall declined. The 16-year-old was last seen by Kendall at approximately 8 p.m., when he rushed out of the house in a fit of rage. Kendall figured Sam just needed a little alone time to clear his head. However, the family started to worry when she didn't come home to her grandparents that evening. The adolescent had fled before, but it had generally been for a day or only a few hours. She never traveled far or stayed away for very long. However, things were different this time. After a few days without any news, Sam's family filed a missing persons report. But from the beginning, Kendall believed it was a waste of time because the Burleson Police Department didn't seem to be interested in the case. Sam's problematic past and history of running away, like those of many missing youths we cover on this channel, led detectives to believe that she had left willingly and would be okay on her own or return whenever she felt like it. However, Sam never came home. The 16-year-old was not looked for, and her disappearance was not looked into. Not even friends and family were questioned by the authorities. Since 2004, there have been relatively few updates to the case and very little mention in the media. When Kendale and her grandparents got home a week after the adolescent vanished, they discovered strange cigarette butts and rearranged furniture in their backyard. Kendale pondered whether Sam had invited a few of her pals to hang out without them being aware that the family was away. After reporting this odd activity to the police, they were instructed to change their locks. One source claims that police in Columbia County, Oregon, ran Sam's name on February 17, 2011, although no documentation of this investigation is currently available. Similarly, the same article claims that on June 20, 2014, around 9:50 p.m., U.S. Customs and Border Patrol agents operating under the name Samantha Tapp were stationed at the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, which is about 30 to 40 minutes away from Burleson. But once more, there is no longer any documentation of this search. Kendall has mentioned that she didn't have a passport when Sam vanished. Since she vanished, her social security number has likewise been unused. The Texas Attorney General was contacted by the Burleson Police Department in 2015 to look into Sam's disappearance. The 16-year-old was put on probation for taking her aunt's automobile without permission a few months prior to her disappearance. She was regarded as a fugitive since she vanished while she was still on probation. The police had hoped that the Attorney General's additional resources would aid in the search for the missing team, but they were unsuccessful. Sam was nowhere to be found. Kendall is still searching for information on her sister's whereabouts. In the hopes of finding something that may lead her to Sam, she has gathered the case files from the Burleson Police and the Attorney General. She has maintained the same phone number for the past 18 years in case her sister calls. She also said that if she could talk to Sam, she would reassure her that she is safe and that she doesn't need to be afraid to return home since there are people who care about her. We still don't know Sam's fate as of May 2022. On October 12, 2004, Samantha Tapp, then 16 years old, disappeared from Burleson, Texas. She is characterized as a 5'4" Caucasian woman with brown eyes and black hair. She weighed 120 when she was last seen. She might go by Van Diver in her last name and wear contacts or glasses. She will be 33 years old if she survives. Please call 914-426-9910 to report any information regarding Sam's disappearance to the Burleson Police Department. Moving on to the next case. The Bowmont children disappearance. A genuine crime case that rocked Australia in 1966 altered the nation's course forever. After the dramatic disappearance of Anna, Jane, and Grant Bowmont, parents began to closely monitor their children during the day instead of letting them walk freely. No child was safe anymore, and even close-knit communities found it difficult to have faith in one another. The devastating disappearance of the Bowmont children still has an impact nearly 60 years later. 9-year-old Jane, 7-year-old Anna, and 4-year-old Grant Bowmont requested their parents if they might go to Glenelg Beach early on January 26, 1966. They had been the previous day, but it was an even hotter day, and they were eager to return because they had had so much fun. At 8:45 a.m., they boarded the bus since it was too hot to walk. The kids agreed when their mother Nancy advised them to take the 12 p.m. bus back home. However, neither the 2 p.m. bus nor the 12 p.m. bus ever brought the trio back, which worried Nancy. When their father Jim got home about 3 p.m. from his trip and realized the kids weren't home, he drove straight to the beach, which was only a 5-minute bus ride from the family's Somerton Park, Adelaide, house on Harding Street. Jim couldn't find the kids on the crowded beach, so he went back home with Nancy and they started looking for them. They knocked on people's homes, searching the streets, but no one had seen Grant, Anna, or Jane. The couple called the police that evening at about 5 o'clock to report the disappearance. At first, the authorities thought the kids had gotten lost and couldn't find their way back. In the belief that they couldn't have gone very far, they set up searches all around the beach. But soon after, they were aware of a more evil plot, and the search for the Bowmont kids spread to the sand hills, the neighboring buildings, and the ocean. Investigators speculated that the missing person was tall, with fair to light brown hair and a slender face. Airports and train stations were also notified of the absence. He had a slender to athletic frame, a suntanned complexion, and was in his mid-30s when he vanished. His clothes were bathing trunks. The kids were playing and seemed to be at ease and familiar with the father, according to witnesses. Additionally, he allegedly went up to a witness who claimed that the kids' money was stolen and inquired as to if anyone had seen anything or been in close proximity to their possessions. The Bowmont kids waited for him as he went to change. By 12:15 p.m., the group departed from the beach. 2.5 hours later, a fourth witness observed the 4 people together again, with the man carrying a bag that looked like Jane's. Their parents were perplexed when asked what they thought of what the witnesses had observed. Nancy thought it strange that her eldest kid felt so at ease playing in front of this stranger and regarded Jane in particular as being extremely bashful. Because of this, investigators hypothesized that the man had previously interacted with the children and they had learned to trust him. Interestingly, Anna revealed to Nancy in the final days before they disappeared that Jane, quote, had made love to someone at the beach. Nancy took the remark lightly at the time, assuming Anna was referring to a playmate of the same age. In the days that followed the children's disappearance, investigators discovered that they had visited Wenzel's Bakery on neighboring Mosley Street. The store owner, who saw the kids frequently, informed her that Jane had paid £1 for a meat pie and some pasties. Nancy hadn't given Jane even £1, so this was odd. She always handed the kids money in the form of coins. They had 6 shillings 6p on the day they vanished, which was plenty to pay for their lunch and bus expenses, but nothing more. They had never purchased a meat pie before, the storekeeper added. Authorities surmised that the children had probably received the £1 note from someone else, most likely the odd man they had been spotted with. On January 29th, a woman said that she had spoken with 3 youngsters who appeared to be the Bowmonts at the Patawalonga Boat Haven at approximately 7 teachers that evening, the night before they vanished. This provided them with yet another clue. After that, the haven was examined and emptied, but no proof turned up. It took months for another witness to come forward. A woman reported that she had witnessed a man with 2 girls and a boy enter what she thought to be an empty house on her street the night before the disappearance. Subsequently, she noticed the youngster strolling by himself, but the man pursued him and roughly seized him. However, there was no movement at the residence the next morning, and she didn't see the group again. It's unclear why this woman didn't disclose the information earlier, but it doesn't appear to have led to any fruitful leads. Only a few months after the children disappeared in November 1966, Dutch psychic Gerard Croce was sent to Australia to help with the investigation. Not unexpectedly, his attempt to advance the case was unsuccessful. He allegedly altered his account on a regular basis and provided the police with no credible leads or proof. He said the children were buried in a location at a warehouse close to their home. Despite their reluctance to dig, the property owners managed to gather $40,000 to have the building removed. However, a search quickly produced no results, including no human remains or kid-related items. In 1996, the property would be searched once more, but this time nothing turned up. Police never confirmed any of the sightings of the children that had been reported across the nation over the course of the next year. Nancy and Jim, the children's parents, received 2 letters in 1968, 2 years after the children vanished. One was allegedly written by Jane, the oldest of the group, and the other was penned by a guy claiming to be the children's guardian. Subsequently, envelopes bearing a postmark from Dandenong, Victoria, were received. The guy expressed his willingness to return the children and suggested a time and location for their meeting. The letters, purportedly written by Jane, described a very regular life and contained nothing concerning. When investigators compared the letters to notes Jane had written prior to her disappearance, they concluded the letters were real. Jim and Nancy were to meet the man who was sending a detective after them, they determined. But no one showed up. Soon after, another letter purportedly came from Jane. She stated that her parents had breached the man's trust by attending the meeting with a disguised detective, and as a result, the man had decided to retain them. After then, no further letters showed up. However, a forensic investigation in 1992 showed that the letters were a fraud. Investigators discovered a 41-year-old man who had written the letters as a joke and was a teenager at the time using fingerprint analysis. Because so much time had gone, he was not charged with any crimes. There have been a ton of well-known suspects in the case over the years, even though the man who was seen with the kids the day they vanished has never been positively identified. Suspects in the case throughout the years in 1980. Bevan Spencer von Enum received a life term in jail in 1984 for the teen Richard Kelvin's murder. He has refused to help with police regarding any potential connections to other violent acts, despite the fact that investigators thought he had accomplices. While investigating von Enum, officials received a call from an informant going by the name Mr. B. Mr. E.B. claimed to have spoken with the murderer. who boasted of kidnapping 3 kids from a beach and taking them home to experiment on them. According to reports, von Enam went on to say that he had connected them up after doing skillful surgery on each of them. But after one of the kids passed away during the surgery, he killed the other 2 and disposed of their remains in Adelaide's southern bushland. Despite the fact that von Enam matched witness descriptions and the E-fits that the perpetrator had back then, investigators had not previously suspected von Enam of being connected to the Bowmont child case, according to Mr. von Enam as well. When 11-year-old Joanne Ratcliffe and 4-year-old Kirsty Gordon disappeared during a football game at the Adelaide Oval Sports Ground, it was dubbed the 1973 Adelaide Oval Abductions. B claimed to have been involved in these disappearances. Many of the suspects in both crimes are the same, as we discussed in our previous episode on the Adelaide Oval abductions. Police view Mr. B as a trustworthy source because he helped with crucial information during the Richard Calvin murder investigation, but they did not fully believe his claims regarding von Enam's ties to the Bowmont children and the Adelaide Oval case. The information that Mr. B had given did not match the recognized facts surrounding the Bowmont case. While von Enam was known to have a concern with children and was known to visit Glenelg Beach often to spy on the changing rooms, investigators noticed that he is also significantly younger than the man who was depicted with the children that day. At the time of the disappearance, he was in his early 20s, and the youngsters were significantly younger than von Enam's typical victims. Typically, he aimed after young males in their teens and 20s. Arthur Stanley Brown, who passed away in 2002, is another suspect in this investigation, as well as the Adelaide Oval abductions case. Brown was accused of killing Judith and Susan McKay in Townsville, Queensland in 1998. On August 26, 1970, while en route to school, they disappeared. Their remains, strangled to death, were discovered in a dry creek bed a few days after they vanished. Brown's trial was supposed to start in 2 weeks, but his attorney said he wasn't ready for the stand-up. Because he was diagnosed with dementia and Alzheimer's disease, he was never tried again. Several times, Brown has been charged with sexual assault against his own wife, Hester Porter, who has admitted to her sister that she was scared of him. Hester told her sister that she had seen Brown appear to have a sexual interest in young girls and that she had once witnessed him abusing a child. In the 1980s, a number of other Hester's family members came forward and reported that Brown had mistreated them while they were little. In 1978, Hester passed away. Her arthritis kept her confined to her bed. Furthermore, many of her relatives think Brown killed her, despite his story that she had fallen and struck her skull. Interestingly, he wed the younger sister of Hester later that year. Although Brown was 53 in 1966, he would have been somewhat older than the man seen with the Bowmont children. He is said to bear a striking likeness to the E-fit made of the suspect in both cases. Because Brown's job records were missing at the time, detectives trying to follow his activities in the 1960s were unable to determine his whereabouts. Investigators observed that since Brown was employed by the Queensland Department of Public Works and had access to government buildings, it was possible that he destroyed his own files or that the data were lost in the flood that occurred in Brisbane in 1974. Derek Percy, a 2013 deceased child murderer, is the third suspect in the Bowmont children case. The Age newspaper in Melbourne made a suggestion about Percy as a suspect in 2007. He filed an insanity plea in 1969 after killing Yvonne Tuohy, in part because of a medical condition that prevented him from recalling the specifics of his acts. He purportedly said that because of this illness, he was unable to recall whether or not he had also slain the Bowmont children in 1966. In relation to the matter, Percy was questioned by Victoria Police in 2007. He would have only been 17 at the time, which is significantly too young to fit the description of the man observed with the kids on the day they vanished, according to investigators. It was also unknown whether he had access to a car at the time, even though authorities think the suspect would have needed one to leave the scene and dispose of the dead afterwards. Whether Percy remains a suspect in this case is unknown. Alan Anthony Monroe, a businessman, was one of the other suspects. Alan McIntyre, who had been questioned in relation to the Bowmont case, brought Monroe to the attention of the police. According to McIntyre's statement to the Adelaide Advertiser in 1966, Monroe, who remained unidentified at the time, visited his home carrying the Bowmont children's bodies in the trunk of his vehicle. Monroe, a scoutmaster, entered a guilty plea to 10 charges of child sex dating back to 1962. Additionally, McIntyre claims that she was wanted in Southeast Asia in the 1960s for additional charges of child abuse. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison with a 5-year, 5-month parole period after entering a guilty plea to his charges. In June 2017, after several decades, investigators obtained a 1966 child's journal. Monroe was in the Glenelg Beach region when the kids vanished, according to the diary's author. Despite Monroe's investigation in relation to the case, investigators have not discovered any proof of his involvement. Then, in 2013, after the book The Satin Man, uncovering the mystery of the missing Bowmont children was published, the last suspect in the case came to light. The Satin Guy is now recognized as Harry Phipps, a factory owner who passed away in 2004, despite not being named in the novel. Phipps belonged to Adelaide's social elite in the 1960s, and his son, who was alienated from him, revealed his identity soon after The Satin Man was released. Not only did Phipps seem like the e-fit of the man who was seen with the kids the day they vanished, but he was also extremely well off and frequently gave them £1 coins. Moreover, he resided about 250 meters from the shore in 1966. In 2007, Hayden, the estranged son of Phipps, came out. In 1966, when he was 15, he clearly recalled seeing the Bowmont kids playing in his father's backyard. It wasn't until later that accusations that Phipps was a pedophile surfaced, with his own son, Hayden, among his victims. Wayne, another son of Phipps, has, however, come out against his brother and claims that his father was a ruthless child abuser. He asserted, quote, "This is wrong," claiming that Hayden, who passed away in 2016, had made up the accusations because of mental health problems. "It is causing pain to the people I love and the memories of the people I loved. We adored Harry and still think he was innocent." According to CNN reporter Frank Pangiello, Harry Phipps wasn't your typical predator. He was a prosperous man. He was a respected member of the community, a prosperous businessman, and an industry captain. He would not have been suspect in the first place. However, Hayden's testimony and the material from the book The Silk Man were deemed plausible by the police, particularly after 2 men came forward to say that Phipps had paid them when they were boys to dig a hole in his manufacturing yard on the weekend the children vanished. He never explained to them the purpose of the 2x1x2 meter pit. A 1 meter squared portion of the former Phipps factory was excavated in November of 2013. One little abnormality was detected by ground-penetrating radar, but additional research at the excavated site turned up no fresh proof or clues indicating the Bowmont children had been buried there. In 2018, an additional excavation was conducted. Even though bones were discovered, it was shown that they belonged to an animal. I can confirm that we have searched the areas of interest and reached the bottom of those areas and gone well below so that we can be 100% certain, Chief Superintendent Desbray said to reporters. "I can attest that while we have discovered animal bones, no human remains have been discovered at the location. Regretfully, this implies that although we still don't have the answers, we will stop at nothing to find the Bowmont children and return them to their family." Parents all around Australia were profoundly impacted by the case of the missing Bowmont children, which led to one of the biggest police investigations in Australian history. In the 1960s, it was typical for kids to be left alone to explore public areas and ride public transportation. However, the Bowmont case turned everything around, particularly considering how quickly it followed the 1965 Wanda Beach murders, which claimed the lives of 2 adolescent girls, Marianne Schmidt and Christine Sharrock. after Jane, Anna, and Grant vanished. Their parents lived in their Somerton Park house for many years. They thought the three would eventually find their way back to their house. According to reports, Nancy even maintained their bedroom precisely as it was on January 26, 1966, the day they left for Glenelg Beach. In the months that followed their disappearances, Nancy said to reporters, "I don't think they're alive, but I haven't lost hope." All she wanted was for them to return. But in the subsequent year, her attitude toward the case appeared more upbeat. In an interview with Australia's Daily Telegraph in February 1967, she said, "The longer this goes on, the more confident I feel that they are still alive. You know that last night I had a dream about them? Normally, I don't dream. Actually, since the kids left, this is the first meaningful dream I've had. However, I dreamed last night that there was a knock on the rear door. It was the kids. They greeted their mother. My sole comment was, 'Where have you been?' They stood in the lobby toward the rear. I felt them all over and wept. You are aware that this is my first ever dream?" In 2023, the case is still unresolved. Since the 2018 excavation of Phipps Industrial Yard, there have been no fresh projects. According to Police Commissioner Grant Stevens, the quality of the forensic evidence gathered at the time the children vanished, the memory of witnesses, and the deaths of witnesses all contribute to the increased difficulty in concluding that specific investigation. He also noted that the likelihood of solving the case decreases with each passing year. He was quick to clarify, though, that the case is still ongoing and that any fresh information will be looked into in depth. Sadly, Jim and Nancy are no longer with us. Nancy passed away on September 16, 2019, at the age of 92 at an Adelaide care facility. 97-year-old Jim passed away on April 9, 2023. A reward of up to $1,000 is offered in this case to anyone whose information results in the kidnapper of the children being found guilty. You can reach Crime Stoppers at 1800 333 if you have any information regarding the disappearance of Jane, Anna, and Grant Bowmont. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing cold cases with us. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Cold Case Mystique for more deep dives into unsolved mysteries. Your support helps us bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any cases you'd like us to cover next. See you in the next video, and remember, the search for truth never stops.